So Bernard, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But
Thank you.
before we walk into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Rustenburg, a mining town. My dad worked on the mines as a surface carpenter, and I matriculated there in 1978, a very long time ago.
And Bernard, what was your dream career when you grew up?
You know, I didn't have the sort of aspirations to be anything other. My school marks were good enough to at least dream about becoming an engineer. So I always dreamed to become an industrial engineer. It was one of the few disciplines I knew about. But then ISCOR wouldn't give me a bursary, and so I ended up getting a bursary to study mining engineering, and that's really how I became a mining engineer. So I wanted to study engineering, and in the end, I had to study what I could get a bursary for.
And Bernard, can you tell us who inspired you or what inspired you in your young days?
You know, like I say, the environment in which I grew up, there were no like role models, other engineers also I was exposed to. And so it was truly a case of, you know, my parents were very hardworking, diligent people. And I would have to admit that despite I didn't want to become what they were, I, you know, was truly inspired by people who went about life in a way that, you know, they were trying to establish or create a better future for their children. Very narrow, I know. But I mean, I still think deep down, that's what we all aspire to, is to create a better opportunity and a better world for those who come behind us, especially our children. So I would have to admit that my parents, and especially my mother, was a role model for me all my life.
Thank you. And Bernard, you are one of the mining leaders in the country, in the world. You've been the CEO of Harmony Gold for 22 years. You're leading the Joburg and the mining Indaba, Johannesburg, and London. Looking back over your career, would you say there was a turning point, or maybe a couple of turning points?
Yeah, so I was only CEO of Harmony for 12 years, but it felt like 24 years. No, so, you know, when I came out of the varsity and I started working in the mines, I still had to, in those days, as a young white boy, I had to do 2 years of military service, compulsory military service. And when I came out of the army after that, the mine I was working on, Grootvlei, was where the National Union of Mine Workers, under the General Secretary Cyril Ramaphosa, today our president, just won a landmark case to be legally allowed to form a union. And so when I came out of the army, the world was a different place. When I went into the army, you know, there was a certain order. And when I came out, there was a completely different order. And that resulted in a generation of senior managers and people ahead of me just leaving. They were not going to stand for this new order. And that created an industry in which there were always more opportunities than what there were suitably qualified candidates. So I was a beneficiary of an environment where in those days you had to be a white male, you know, in order to have some of those jobs. I was a white male. I was a mining graduate. And there were more opportunities than what there were candidates. Later, a few years later, a second fundamental turning point in my career was I went for one of those industry assessments at Makofle, Anglo-American facility. And there was my career before that, where I was sort of probably deemed to be good enough for senior management. And then after the assessment, I mean, I was earmarked as somebody with potential go beyond that, and the whole system started to treat me like that. So after that assessment, I came back to the same company, the same opportunity, but I was earmarked as a potential high flyer. And of course, once that happened in your career, especially in the environment I was in, I almost had a paved path, you know, to opportunities which I perhaps a few years earlier could not even dream about.
Right. Now, Bernard, looking into the future, what does the future of leadership mean to you?
I think we're going to have to lead differently. I think especially those of us with technical backgrounds, I think we're going to have to be proud that we have got technical skills. We should, go through the ranks and develop our managerial skills. But managerial skills comes with the position you get. For me, leadership is that what is beyond that. How do you get people, to want to follow in the direction that you lead them? And we can unpack that. But I honestly think the future of leadership is obviously going to be much more, what is the word I'm looking for? Democratic. I mean, followers has got a choice. They can work for you, but they don't have to follow you. And so I think the future of leadership has to rediscover the role of a leader, which is to paint a picture of the future, to instill hope, to give people a reason to get up in the mornings and feel good about what they do. And so is that different to the past? No, but I think especially in the business environment, I think we have outsourced leadership to policies, to incentives, to remuneration structures. And we've taken away that role of a leader that instills hope. I'm a firm believer that one of the key ingredients of leadership is to instill hope.
Thank you. And Bernard, what have you learned from your own leadership journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
Oh, I tell you, please don't make the mistakes I've made. No, I do think it took me quite some time to be comfortable in my own skin. I had to. So I was a young Afrikaans speaking guy in an industry which really wasn't expecting my type, people like me, to make it to the top. Very early on in my career, I got given advice to please go and have better suits made and to go to classes to improve my English. Well, I had I bought a very expensive suit and I still speak bad English. But what comes out of that is actually to be comfortable with who you are, because that's authenticity, and to lead specific to your own abilities and skills. And people actually like the spikiness of authenticity. So I think what I've learned, and this is why I say I wish other people could learn it earlier, is the more comfortable you are with who you are, actually the more palatable or acceptable you will be for people who have to follow you or can choose to follow you. And that's a great relief. I mean, can you imagine being the best version of you is good enough? I mean, I think it's a great relief. I don't have to be like Madiba. I can't be like Steve Jobs. I don't have to be a carbon copy, a second best version of somebody else. But if I'm the best version of me, I think I will be the best leader I could ever be.
That's a great definition of authentic leadership. Thank you, Bernard. Now, as the world is going through challenges and stumbling from one crisis into the next, what is your advice for future leaders about challenges? What are some of the big challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
So, I mean, all these cliches of, change is the only constant and, and things will change faster. That's all, of course, true. I do believe, the pace at which things develop and change is going to just increase. And so I think leaders, again, should, not attempt to be Superman or Spider-Man or Superwoman. I mean, so you need to be able to, or be comfortable to lead other people who are smarter than you, cleverer than you, bring skills that you don't bring, and just assist them or align them towards a clear vision of the future. I am a firm believer that a leader who doesn't have a dream 5 years out, 10 years out, make the company a better place, make the world a better place, will be hard to follow. Why would you follow somebody who's not going anywhere? You know what I mean? That sounds like silly to me. And then obviously part of the leadership managerial interface is where leaders then also have to take decisions, tough decisions, But again, any decision is better than no decision in most instances. And so to be comfortable to make decisions, some of them will be wrong, to be comfortable to adjust, to say, I thought this was the right decision in hindsight, or because the circumstances changed, it turned out not to be. I have found in my life that people really relate to decisiveness. And again, if we look at the world around us, there are clear examples of decisive leaders and people who are less decisive. And I think we all naturally relate to people who are prepared to take decisions.
Absolutely. And Bernard, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the skills you would want to focus on and maybe teach?
Oh, you know, my wife wrote a book, and we can talk about it later, about the philosophy her and I have when it comes to leadership. And to me, there are two components to that. You know, so this is shared wisdom. It's my wife's wisdom. I'm allowed to share it. I think there's the personal journey. You know, I mean, you know, I really believe that, you know, we should get the technical skills, become engineers. In my case, I also did a 4-year financial degree. So as Tom Peters would say, you know, yes, we are technically insanely qualified. There's nothing wrong with that, you know. But then we also have to deal with ourselves, you know. We need to really be authentic and vulnerable, you know. So what is it that we don't know, and how do we get other people to do that? Because the theme you will always hear me speak about this, you know, that's when we are brave enough, you know, to show up as ourselves. And that's a personal journey. And we should help young people with that. We should help leaders with that. You know, we should stop trying to mold them in our image. You know, we should, you know, stop trying to make them exactly the same as whoever, myself or somebody else. Now, the two things I did post my corporate career is I actually went for training of how to listen. Right? I mean, it makes for better marriage, it makes for better life, but listening is a skill, and I don't think we develop that adequately. I also spent some time and coach and teach in the area of using storytelling as a communication skill. How powerful it is. This is how we actually communicate as human beings, you know, through story. And so those are on the sort of personal side. On the how do you lead other people? I really think it is quite simple. You know, I do think you as a leader should paint a picture of a future, you know, so clearly that you can go and stand at it, you can excite other people about that, you know. Now, obviously, once you know where you want to go, and this is a skill, it's a visualizing how do you want the future of the mining industry to look? How do you want the future of your company in gold mining want to look like? Now, obviously, that's not where your people are. Now, this again comes back to, do you listen to your people? Go and find out where your people are, so that you can lead from where they are. You know, sometimes leaders live so in the future that gap is a Grand Canyon. I mean, leaders' job ultimately is to connect dots, to make sense, to help interpret the world as it is now in a way that it makes sense for that company, for that corporate. And then the other overused term is, obviously, we need to empower the people in our organization to lead towards that destiny with us. Now, these are all teachable things. These are not skills I was born with. These were not the role models I perhaps had in the early days of my mining industry career. And yet, I think all of these are the skills that we can actually impart on younger people much earlier than the way perhaps some of us had to find it out for ourselves.
Right. And Bernard, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So I had the privilege to work with so many people who today are leaders in our industry specifically. There was a time where at least 10 people who I had the privilege of working with me when I was the CEO of Harmony has gone on to be CEOs. And in many instances in jobs much bigger than what I had. But I still, I'm not comfortable to say, ooh, that was because of my role, because I mean there are multiple factors that impact on these people, and this is the visible thing. But I must say, what I find most rewarding is sometimes you bump into somebody and you don't even remember them. and you don't remember the interaction which they play back to you as saying, this was a turning point in my life. When you did this, that happened. And I mean, to give you one perhaps bad example is my wife and I were once meeting with two guys to come. They came to ask for our advice to assist them. And the guy introduced himself and he said, do you remember me? I said, I'm so sorry, I don't. He said, you retrenched me. And I thought, oh my gosh, this meeting is going to go south. What good can come out of that? He says, you know what? That was the best thing that ever happened to me. And what you said to me in the conversation, which I don't recall, changed my life. And I think, okay, so leaders, I mean, impact beyond formal interaction, beyond formal coaching, beyond, and on the one hand, you can say that's a huge responsibility, be careful. On the other hand, you can actually relax and say, if you go about life in a certain way, you will impact on people, you will actually coach people, you will mentor people, you will role model things that change other people's lives. And it's fantastic to hear about it, but that's not why we do it.
Right. And Bernard, looking back over your leadership career, are there any role models of leadership that you encountered and would recommend future leaders should study?
You know, I think by now you can hear where I am. So the hero lies in you.
Yeah.
You know? It really is. It's your version. You know. So I tell people, please don't copy. You know, study what other good and great leaders are doing, but then you have to internalize it and interpret it for what will work for you. You know, I do not want to be a bad version of Steve Jobs or whoever a hero leader is. I mean, pick your hero leader. Many of us want to copy too much of Elon Musk for the moment, you know, although he's done fantastic things. Now, so I think the key is this authenticity. The best version of you is what the world deserves. That is what you're called to be, the best version of you. And so I must have read, I don't know, I definitely have got hundreds of leadership books. I'm a collector of books, and buying the books is a separate hobby from reading the books.
Right.
And I've read 100 books, I'm sure. And I read the book, and the one thing I know is I could never be that guy or that lady. But in that book, in that life story, in that set of experiences, there are things that make me think, with my experience, with my skills, what of that, you know, can I enhance, polish, get smarter at? So role models, there are people I look up to, but not in a way of I want to copy anybody. I'm not as full of myself as it sounds, but I'm very comfortable to be the best version of me at almost every moment where I get an opportunity to lead. And there's no, that's the best I can do.
Thank you. And Bernard, where can our listeners follow you and how can they connect with you?
Oh, that's not so easy. You know, I'm very visible in the mining industry. As you said in the introduction, I chair quite a few mining industry conversations. I am mostly active on the web through my wife and I's consulting business, Thinkspiration. I can probably even, I just can't get it to focus.
7. I can see 7.
It's not going to focus. There's a book about leading for engagement that is, again, achievable or reachable through the website of Thinkspiration. So it's a combination of think and inspiration. So if people go to Thinkspiration, they'll see, you know, what I really believe is the correct approach to the future of leadership. And they will be shocked and disappointed at how simple it is. It is not esoteric. It's not, you know, I mean, it is basic, simple stuff. It's the stuff that I now share and teach and, you know, with my wife, preach, literally, because I think if only I knew this when I was 25. At 30, I had fantastic jobs and no leadership skills, you know. And so I think it is as simple as that sometimes.
And Bernard, last but not least, what is your message to the millions of learners out there who are now looking to finish school, to enter the workplace? What are maybe 1 or 2 success factors that they should keep in mind?
May I come back to what I've said before? because then people will at least believe I'm really serious about this. It's just be brave enough to know yourself, and then be brave enough to show up as yourself. So be brave enough to know yourself, and it's hard work. It's not easy. In many cultures, it's almost not done. I had to go against my culture to really deal with myself, to be comfortable with myself, and then show up as yourself. So you speak bad English, it's your second language, so you dress differently, so you are male or female, doesn't matter. Show up as yourself, because that is authenticity. And the world is craving authentic leaders, authentic people. You will have followers if you're authentic, as spiky as it may be.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernard, for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership, and for inspiring so many of us.